Welcome, everyone, to Deconstructing Leftists. Today, I want to talk about a tragic anniversary. It's January the 22nd, and this is the anniversary of one of the worst decisions ever made by the U.S. Supreme Court. That is the Roe versus Wade decision from 1973. Now, I can say that it is a terrible decision, even if I was pro-choice. Whether I'm pro-life or pro-choice, it was a terrible decision by the U.S. Supreme Court. The justices of the Supreme Court took an oath to protect and defend the Constitution. When they came up with the Roe versus Wade decision, they did just the exact opposite of what they swore to do, because there is nothing in the U.S. Constitution that gives women a right to kill their unborn child. You can get a magnifying glass out and you can go through it section by section. You won't find anything about it. And according to the 10th Amendment to the Constitution, any rights that are not mentioned in the Constitution, they are determined by the states. So the issue of whether or not to allow women the choice to destroy their unborn child, that is a states' rights issue. Now, I could say, looking at the Constitution, that if there is any right either way, it's a right to life for the child, because whenever an abortion takes place, they're denied the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and because they're never even allowed to be born. But as far as Roe versus Wade goes, it was just bad law. And not only that, but Harry Blackmun, the justice from the Supreme Court that wrote the decision, he went around talking about this decision all over the place, even after he retired as a Supreme Court justice. And he said he knew that there was nothing in the Constitution where that the framers of the Constitution ever intended to give women the right to have an abortion. He said that it was a right that he just thought they should have, so he created this so-called right to privacy out of the Constitution by massaging it and twisting it into knots. That's what he had to do to make that decision. He basically broke his oath of office. So whether pro-life or pro-choice, it was a bad decision. This was something that needed to be decided by state legislatures, not the U.S. Supreme Court. So I'm very glad that it was overturned. Now, I make no bones about the fact that I'm pro-life. And so obviously I was against Roe versus Wade based on that. But it is bad law too. And anybody that thinks differently, go back and read the Constitution. I think that one thing that happened when Roe was overturned is it did cause a lot of people to go back and read it for themselves, because they were going around trying to locate this right so they could come against the Supreme Court when they overturned it. But strangely enough, you didn't hear, any arguments hardly about this right being right there in the Constitution, plain for everybody to see. I never heard those arguments. I just kept hearing people complaining about the Supreme Court overturning it and not agreeing with it. But you got to remember, these are judges. They're supposed to be figuring out the intent of a law and ruling based on that. They're not supposed to be legislating from the bench. And the difference between the Supreme Court today, that the liberals are all up in arms about, and the Supreme Court that existed in 1973, is the current Supreme Court, or at least 6 of the justices, 5 is pretty reliable, 6 of them, you could say, are more in line with just trying to figure out the intent and ruling based on that rather than legislating from the bench. There are liberal justices on the court that would still legislate from the bench, and they're oftentimes the ones dissenting on the decisions. But right now, the court is dominated with judges that actually are trying to follow the original intent of those that wrote the Constitution and try to find the original intent of those that pass laws. And that's the way it's supposed to be, no matter what it is. But this has been it was a tragic decision by the court. We've had more than 50 million children that we've lost as a result of that horrible decision. And to me, one of the greatest things that ever happened was the overturning of Roe versus Wade. But even though it has been overturned, there's still a lot of work to be done, because even though it has been outlawed in a couple of states, and in some states it's been regulated to the point where it's very difficult for women to get abortions because it's got to be done so early in the pregnancy. But there are states where they're still killing unborn children in very large numbers, and there's no restrictions whatsoever. And one thing that's different about this today, as opposed to the way it was before the overturning of Roe v. Wade, and some things even further back than that, but certainly since then, not only do we have more knowledge about what the Constitution says and doesn't say, because people did go back and look into it, but in addition to that, we also know more about biology and unborn babies. We know more about what they call the fetus today than what we used to know, even in 1973. We've got ultrasound technology today. And it's very difficult now for anybody with a straight face to tell someone that this is just potential life, because people can look at that ultrasound, and just about everybody has seen the picture of a baby on an ultrasound, even in the very early stages of life. Just about everybody has seen that now, and they're not seeing potential life. They're seeing a small child inside the mother's womb, oftentimes sucking its thumb like a baby will do. But that's what they're seeing. They're seeing a child. And they know now that when an abortion takes place, that a living human being is being ripped apart, and they can't fool people like they used to. That's one reason why the division is very close today compared to what it used to be. For a long time, it did seem like the pro-choicers really outnumbered pro-lifers, and they still do overall. But the numbers are much closer than what they used to be, and that's one of the reasons why when the pro-choicers were trying to pass a amendment, or I believe it was an amendment down in Florida, to give women the right to abortion, they couldn't get the 60% they needed to get that done. I think they were expecting to get 60%, but they didn't get it. And it was kind of a shock to them. They didn't get that much. In Ohio, where they did get what they wanted, the threshold was lower, or they wouldn't have gotten it in Ohio too. If it was 60% necessary in Ohio, it would have gone down to defeat too, because it's a lot closer than what people think it is. And even amongst voters, it's not as it's not as big of an issue as the pro-choicers think it is. It's not the big winning issue. During the last presidential election, Kamala Harris made it the main thing that she was talking about was women's right to choose. And she made it a key thing in her campaign, even with songs where they kept singing freedom, freedom in her little song as she was doing the ad. And it was all about stuff like abortion. And of course, they were also making up lies about President Trump and how that he was seeking to become king over America and in democracy. Now, I know some of them are still trying to claim that's the case, but we know it's not. But they were trying to claim all of that stuff. But that was her main thing, and she still lost the election. They were expecting women to turn out in huge numbers just over the abortion issue, and that was going to be the end all. Like there was no other issues that mattered to women. It was just that. And if she would just promote that, she thought that they would just overwhelm the vote. But there are a lot of pro-life women. And whenever I've been involved in the pro-life movement, working with Right to Life or other pro-life groups, and even the times I've gotten to attend the March for Life in Washington, D.C., a large number of the people that were at the march and a lot the leaders in these pro-life organizations, a lot of them are female. And so when as a matter of fact, the chapter of Right to Life that was in my town, there was women that were running the organization. So there are a lot of pro-life women, and there are also a lot of women that could be pro-choice, but it's not a top priority issue to them. It's lower down the totem pole than what people like Kamala Harris thought. They also have to care about stuff like the massive inflation we had under Joe Biden and stuff like that. And they have concerns over other issues that are going on. And so when you actually had the vote on it, while, yeah, there was a gender gap, it wasn't nearly what they were expecting it would be. And Trump got a higher percentage of the female vote than he'd gotten the previous times. And this is even after Roe v. Wade was overturned. So it's not the big issue that women thought that it was going to help them to the extent that they thought it was. It's just not like that. But what I really wanted to talk about today, in addition to the fact that Roe v. Wade was overturned, and I am personally very happy about that, and the fact that we've got more work to be done in the fight. But one thing that I would say today is I think that it's come down now to where people pretty much know which side of this aisle they're on. So I don't know that there's going to be a lot of room for either side to convince the other side to come over to their view. I say that because I think that since Roe versus Wade was overturned and everybody has spent time investigating it, that it's become obvious that we're dealing with a baby. It's impossible for most people, unless they're totally ignorant, to really believe that this is just some kind of tissue that will turn into a child down the road. We know better than that. We've looked into it. People have seen, as I said, the baby on ultrasound. They've even seen, if they want to see it, they've even seen pictures of aborted babies in pieces. And their arms, hands, legs, feet, toes, a head, a body. They're human beings. We see that. We've seen what they look like, and they're not just tissue. These are human beings. We've seen them in the womb. We've seen them after they've been murdered. So the issue today is not over our side on the pro-life convincing everybody this is a baby. If we find somebody who really is ignorant on it, then of course we need to try to convince them. But I'm finding that what it's really coming down to is a debate over what matters more, the baby's life or the woman's ability to do what she wants with her own body, even if it means choosing to end the life of her little baby boy or little baby girl. And I have actually run into women now who, when it becomes obvious they can't convince others this is only potential life, what they'll do is they'll just say, one of them just came out boldly and said they don't care anything about the baby. They only care about the woman and her choice. Some of them are like that, and that's what they're saying. Others just simply say they don't really like abortion, but they believe the woman's right to do with her own body is more important than the baby's life. And of course, I've pointed out some of the hypocrisy on that, because I'm like, well, where was this crowd when they were forcing the COVID vaccines on people? And why aren't they so concerned over making prostitution legal, or allowing people to use any kind of drugs they want in their body, or, even stuff like suicide, which is also illegal. Where is this crowd when it comes down to all these things? Because obviously the point is that we don't have an absolute right to do anything that we want with our own body. I don't think that we should. But this crowd, they say that in this case, but a lot of them were the ones that were hollering for forcing people to take the COVID vaccine. And most of them, even if they didn't do it on that, they still believe in forcing people to be having their children vaccinated and stuff like that, which is going completely against bodily autonomy. And of course, they claiming that only women have these kind of issues. Well, that's not true. Men have had to deal with these vaccines and stuff like that. And so it's not the way it is in life. It's not where that you have an absolute right to do anything that you want with your own body. So why in the world should it be the case here? And in this case, another human being is also involved in it who has no say in it. It's not like that you can ask the child, do you think it's okay if you are pulled apart, limb from limb and killed because your mother doesn't want you? I mean, you can't do that. The child doesn't have a choice in the matter. So there's a lot of hypocrisy that goes on in this, but it still comes down to that decision. Does the woman having a right to make this decision outweigh the right of a child just to live, even though she, in most cases, her actions led to the pregnancy? In most cases, a lot of the time she didn't use birth control. If she did use birth control, she is aware that there are some instances where maybe it won't work. So it's a risk every time. So in most cases, she made a conscious effort to do the deed that led to it. And so it comes down to, does the woman's choice mean more than the baby's right to life? And, this is an interesting question. As a Christian, obviously, I am against murder. I think it's completely immoral, and I'm against murder of anybody. And the way I view it, the baby's life is as important as my life or any other adult person's life. The way I look at it is just a human being at a certain age, a certain time in, development. It's no different. It's no more immoral to kill the baby's mother than it is to kill the baby. There's still two human beings here. And that's the way I look at it. But now I will say, and I would say the same thing, even if I wasn't a Christian, I'd still say the same thing about that. If we're against murder, then we should be against abortion. But now, if we're talking about an atheist, in that case, at least I can understand them a little bit more, because from the standpoint of thinking that we are just animals and not created in the image of God, I can see that. But then I also see some crazy hypocrisy with them in that they will show no concern for an unborn baby, but they will be, championing all these other things about, so-called human rights, or even in some cases, legitimately human rights. They'll be out there, standing up for different minority groups. They'll be out there standing against human trafficking. They will be standing against murder of their, fellow citizens. They will be standing up against a woman being forced into sexual relations against her will. And again, I would agree these things are all bad, and we do need to stand up for what's right. In at least in most of those cases, there's one group that they do stand up for. I don't consider a true minority group, but that's another story for another video. But the point is, if we're animals, and that's really all we are, then everything should be about what's in our interests across the board. And if an atheist is taking that approach, then I can see where they might be pro-choice and that they don't care one way or the other. I can't see where they would be standing up for women's rights or anything else unless they were a woman, because it's not in the interest of men to do that. And I can't see why they would be concerned over, a mass shooting or because it's just animals dying or anything else like that. So I don't see consistency with atheists that are pro-choice. But because again, it should just come down to whatever is in your best interest. That's what everything should be if you're an atheist, in my opinion. But from the standpoint of anybody that claims to stand up for even the most basic morality, they should be pro-life. Now, again, I understand that there are uncaring, unfeeling people that really don't care about the child. There's probably some of them that would be thinking somebody like what Susan Smith did to her children was perfectly okay because they were her children, even though they were toddlers and, so forth. They weren't babies in the womb. There's probably some people out there that would say that they're her children. She should be able to kill them if she wants to. There's probably people like that out there. And again, I don't make any distinction between those children and children in the womb. They're still children. But that's really what the arguments come down to today. So it really comes down to, does a woman's bodily autonomy make it justifiable to murder her unborn child if she wants to in the name of choice? That's really what it comes down to. And as a person who has been, again, involved in places like Right to Life, and a place that's really about educating people about the fact that this is a child, not a choice, in the way we look at it, I think that for the most part, we all know what's going on here. We all understand that it's a baby. We understand that it's being murdered. But people have still chosen sides. And sadly, there are a lot of people that say the woman's bodily autonomy is more important than a baby's life, even though her choice is totally selfish, even though in most cases she was reckless and having sexual relations, knowing she should get pregnant or could get pregnant and didn't care. Even with all that in mind, and even the fact that this is a little boy or a little girl, half of those babies being slaughtered are female. Where's their rights? So even knowing all of that, there are people that are basically taking the position it's a justifiable homicide. I don't take that position. And but I am getting to the place where I do think that most people understand fully what's going on. And they just have a seared conscience and just don't care. But I did want to bring up this topic of abortion because we are at the anniversary date of Roe versus Wade. Thank God it's been overturned. And from a pro-life perspective, as I said earlier, we've still got a lot of work to do. First of all, we've got to work to make sure that that this stays the way it is, where it's possible to still pass laws banning the practice. And we also need to work to get it banned nationwide. I remember, many years ago when I was in my teens and first got involved with Right to Life, the goal then was overturn Roe v. Wade. Well, we've had that happen, but we knew that would just send it back to the states. And unfortunately, it's still legal in way too many states. There's still too many children being aborted. So we've got a lot of work to do. We got to keep lifting these children up in prayer. We need to be prayerful that God will open the eyes of people to where they will, if there are any left that don't know the truth, that they'll see the truth. If there's any with a seared conscience that doesn't care, that God will bring conviction upon them and they will care. And of course, also from a Christian standpoint, we certainly need to be praying that God will send a revival across America, because we definitely still need revival. We need God back in our country. We are still a Christian nation, even though a lot of the atheists claim otherwise. 68% in the last poll I saw still call themselves Christian in America. And so we are still a Christian nation, but we need to also be concerned with those others that are not saved, those others that are not Christians. We need to win them over to Christ for the sake of their souls, and also for the sake of our country, because a nation without God is not going to be a nation for all that long. It's going to come to an end. Cup of iniquity will get full, and that nation will eventually be destroyed. So it's in our best interest that America be a nation that recognizes God and serves the Lord.